Today, we're going to try to do something a bit different. We're going to talk about resolving some issues, tips and tricks, stuff like that, things that'll help you be more efficient in ComfyUI. And I came up with this idea mainly because today I was trying to work on one of my more advanced tutorials for my Patreon, and I ran into something I'd never seen in video, but I've seen in image generation.
For a long time. Also, this was the first time in Disneyland for both of us.
Now, it's not supposed to have this big black rectangle on the face. It's supposed to be just another iteration that cleans up some of the issues I was having on this animation.
For a long time. Also, this was the first time in Disneyland for both of us. We've never been to Disney.
So, obviously it didn't come out right. But I'm pretty sure that other people have dealt with this black screen. So when you're trying to create an image in ComfyUI and you just suddenly get this like black screen that shows up and none of your image shows up, you've dealt with it, but maybe you don't really know how to resolve it. That's the first thing I want to talk about. And then I'll mention some other things about tips and tricks you can do, as well as some useful nodes that you should have in your arsenal for creating workflows. So let's get to it. Okay, so I've created a scenario where it's most likely gonna happen that there's a black screen. I've already done it once. I'm doing it again to make sure that it's coming through like this. Everything should work. I have the whole, this is basically the character creator workflow that I had, and I've just modified it a bit because I've added on some other things to it. But it's because of the way it's been loaded into the VRAM and all these other things. This is why this black screen occurs. So the real problem lies in the root of how it's loaded into the actual workflow itself. But sometimes, because I ran something else, it interferes with what's loaded into the other model, and then it kind of just loses its place. It doesn't know where it is, it doesn't know what it's doing, and then it just like spits out this black screen. So really, that's the problem you're dealing with. And as you can see, it just spit out this one black screen again, blah, blah, blah. This is mostly just proof that this scenario is occurring with me. I'm not just creating a prompt or something like here that makes a black screen. It's literally doing this error that you've probably dealt with before, hence probably why you came to this video, yes? So right after it loads this other black screen here, I'm going to talk about how we can, resolve this issue so that way we can get what we want, rather than constantly trying to, like, you know, sometimes what I used to do is like reboot my whole machine, which is not necessary, by the way. You don't have to do that. Okay, so we're here. As you can see, we got two black screens that are popping up from the first and second output. And that's obviously not what we want. We want to detail realistic portrait photos of a blonde woman, blah, 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 haircut, you know, what this thing is supposed to generate. Of course, we're doing it with portraits here. We're not trying to do a whole entire body. But nonetheless, we didn't get that. So how do you deal with the scenario? Well, before we get into exactly that, I just want to say there's another thing you should do that comes to my first recommendation about a specific node that will help. And I've already loaded into this because I've been doing it on something else, but this right here. And you know what, for the sake of argument, I'm gonna remove it really quick. One of the cool things about this node is called fast groups. You have the muter and you have the bypasser. Personally, I like the bypasser, made by RG3. This is probably one of the most useful nodes for like really extended workflows where you have a lot of things going on. And the coolest thing about it is once you load it up, it automatically, like whatever groups you have, it automatically puts them on there. And even if you make a new group, just adding another group, just call it group. You see how I just added in another group called group, and it's behind this one right here, so you can't really see it. Yeah, it's right here. Only thing is too that, of course, if there's nothing in it, you can't really enable it. As soon as you put something in it though, then you can enable it. Matter of fact, maybe you could you could group up the fast grouper I never even thought about that. Can you disable the fast grouper? What? Wow. That's interesting. All right, anyways, it's silly, but something you can do. So yeah, this is by far to me one of the, well, I think my favorite little efficient trick and shortcut node, because it does so much stuff and it will help with this particular situation, which is why I introduced it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute the other sections, because what we're trying to do is figure out where the problem node is. Most likely, I believe it's this right here, because usually this is the thing that really screws up. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it's another model loader. I usually never get the problem on pull ID, but sometimes I get it on a problem on control net sometimes. But to narrow it down a lot easier, this is why this is really cool. I can mute this one, and or not mute it, bypass it. Bypass this one, and then bypass the second output, and bypass control net. Let me just expand this so you can actually see the names. So it has the names of the actual groups that I made. And the reason why I bypass it and not mute it is because when you bypass it, it allows you to do this. You can actually still run through it without those other nodes doing anything, which is what I want. So that way I can see if it still turns black way back here. If it still does, then we know that the problem node starts before it. If you did the muter, it wouldn't be able to run because you're not running through anything. So even way back here, which is, if you think about what this is basically just the basic Flux workflow. So there, our problem goes all the way back here. Again, I think the most problematic node is usually the model itself. It's loaded up poorly or truncated or something in the memory, or corrupt, however you want to call it, right? So what we have to do is two things. Well, three things is what I do. First, I do reload node. Then after that, a very important step, go to clean up VRAM usage. This right here is going to clear out all this like VRAM stuff. But what you're going to see too is that it's going to suddenly have the RAM go up at the same time, which I'm pretty sure what it's doing is it's taking it from the VRAM and putting it into the RAM as a result, right? So what we also need to do is get rid of this RAM here, which is why we do a full reboot of ComfyUI as well. But I don't recommend you just do the reboot, and I don't recommend you just do the VRAM dump. I recommend you do reload the node, the VRAM dump, as well as rebooting ComfyUI. And if you don't know, rebooting ComfyUI is the same thing as like doing it from the terminal too. As you can see, it's like redoing the whole thing. So this is the thing that clears out all the, I guess you could say, corrupted methods that were happening in the background. And seeing that the RAM has gone down, you know it's been cleared from the RAM as well. So now, without unmuting anything else, run it again. Now it's going to take a little bit longer because it has to reload everything, all the primary nodes again, but also because you muted everything else, it's not going to load in all those other things, so it won't take as long as it would as if you did it from square one. So let's do that. All right, so now we're finally down here in the K sampler, and this is where you see the magic happen. And boom, there you have it. Now you see it didn't spit out everything we wanted, because you know it's not, the control net's not activated, the pull ID is not activated, but you did actually get an image and not just this little black screen thing. So that's really the issue with that. It has everything to do with what's loaded in your VRAM and your RAM space and stuff like that, and how the model itself is loaded. As far as like ways of preventing this, again, this fast groups bypasser thing will help you prevent it, in the sense that when you first run it, as long as you haven't run anything else, like if you ran something else in another window, like another thing that you were working on, and it had different models, that is where you might run into a problem when you start to reload and do a different model, and that's where the memory kind of gets fouled up a little bit. So if you didn't do that, I recommend that when you run one of these workflows like this for the first time, do the bare bones part first. This is another reason why when I talk about and explain in the tutorials the different aspects of like what is the most basic parts of your actual workflow, you know, the base flux model or the SDXL or whatever, run that thing first, because that's the model that's probably going to be used throughout. Most likely you're not going to change that, and everything else is going to be built on top of that. Run that main one first, so that way it gets loaded properly and you know it, rather than what happens is sometimes these other ones probably get loaded beforehand and then it just doesn't seem to make much sense to the thing and blah blah blah. Another reason why, again, you can mute everything else, then run this first, then you can unmute this. You know, I would probably do it one by one in these sections, like unmute this, let the pull ID run through and load its model, then let the control net run its model, things like that. So this way you can get all the stuff put through your actual workflow in the proper order that it's supposed to be put through. Another really good useful node that I hadn't previously put in anything else, because again, I didn't want to be too confusing and want to harp on any specific things other than actually just basically building workflows. But another good one is, I believe, by RG3 again. Yes, it is. The Power Lora Loader. This saves up a whole lot of space and confusion about things. You just connect it the way you did in the same thing in the Lora tutorial that I made before about how to put Loras in your workflows. You connect it just like that, but instead of the need to continuously like collect more and more Loras as you build more and more stuff, with this one, you literally just add the Lora you want into it, and you can just keep stacking them on top of each other, which I think is the coolest thing ever. Really cool thing. I think you should probably use this, and then of course you can adjust the strength of each one individually. You can even toggle them off, or even all off and on. Really cool node. If you're really trying to add a whole bunch of Loras to a workflow, more than just one. Yeah, in any case, if you're just doing more than just one, I would suggest you use this, because it just makes it a whole lot cleaner on your workflow, and you don't have to keep worrying about how everything is connected all the time. But speaking of connections too, one of the things too that happens, especially in like larger workflows. So let's go back and I'm gonna load that other one really quick. So going back to this workflow, this is just that custom character creation generator thing I did, right? One of the things you'll notice is I have all these like really spaghetti lines and all this stuff like that, and I didn't want to really. I could have, but I didn't want to like make these lines really clean. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You can do it to like manager settings, where you can like actually change, or I think you have it here now where you can toggle like how they like come through, whatever. You can actually toggle link visibility. You can turn them off, right? But I didn't want to do that because I wanted to just show you the pathway that everything goes, and I didn't want to use too many reroutes for the same reason, where like you don't see where the things are coming from. But it does look messy. It even goes over some of the titles of the groups that I created. So there's a bunch of different things about cleaning these up. Again, you can do reroutes. You can go through the actual manager itself. You can go to your cog here, and where this thing says light graph. I don't remember if this is add-on or not. I can't remember. But this thing called like spline is what we're doing right now. But then you can create these straight lines. As you can see it change in the background a little bit. Here, I'll just see how it went straight like that. I don't necessarily like that, but because it's still kind of, as strange as it looks cleaner, it's still kind of more confusing for me sometimes, like the way everything's connected. So there's that part. There's a straight form. There's the linear thing where it's just like goes straight to what you're looking for. You can see right here. And then as we had it before, that was hidden. There's that other thing, toggle visibility, but you can also do it from the cog as well. But I don't know how much you would want to have it stay hidden all the time, because how are you going to know if it's connected or not, right? So there's all those things you can do. I'm gonna go back to spline because I'm just an artist and I think it looks more creative when you have them all over the place and scrambled. That's one thing that you can do to try to help clean up those lines. But there's other things too that not only help you clean up these lines, but also make it easier for connection purposes. Like, one thing you'll notice is the workflow gets a lot bigger. There's certain things though that always repeat, like VAE, right? How many times does this pop up? But it all really goes back to the same place. I put this reroute in here, but even if I take out the reroute, you can see they all come to the same place. So rather than continuously doing this over and over again, it's like if I decided to do a modification on this side and upscale and all that kind of stuff, I'd have to keep bringing it from there, right? And I could put a reroute in the middle to try to not have to bring it so far. But there's something else you could do that makes this a whole lot easier too. Anything, everywhere. All you have to do is plug in this to this, and you can delete everywhere else you see it. You can take it off of here, take it off of here, take it off of here, and it still runs. You'll notice it like kind of has this little weird light up thing that it does, because it's almost like Wi-Fi or something for this VAE or for the node itself. So basically what it's saying is that anywhere that there is something going out or receiving VAE, it's going to come from here. So now you don't have to, every time you have something that requires VAE, it's just going to automatically connect it to this whenever you produce the node. You could do this for other things like the model too, but for this particular one, I wouldn't necessarily do it because there's other versions of this, and this is anything everywhere. This is done by CG Use Everywhere. There's other versions of this where you can see like it has multiple, so like I can have like 3 different ones. Like you can have one for VAE, you can have one that goes for the model and stuff like that, right? But for this particular workflow, I wouldn't necessarily do one for the model because I don't necessarily know where I'm going to pull from all the time. But it could be like the default one if you don't connect anything, right? But as you can see from right here, right, I wouldn't want this thing to be receiving straight from here. I want it to go from the pool ID. Same thing with if it's something coming from ControlNet that required that, but of course it doesn't require the model directly on ControlNet. But you might want to use it for clip, because are you really going to load in some other clip things? Probably not. But you could still utilize that for anything that receives that clip. So any other text encode type thing that you might produce later on. So it's probably more likely that you would use it for something like this, and less likely that you would use it for the model, the clip and the VAE. So that's a really cool thing that allows you to save some time when you're building workflows, but at the same time, it also makes things a little bit cleaner because there's less lines going all over the place. I've used all of these things a lot for my own personal stuff, but I didn't put it in any of the workflows because in none of the tutorials do I explain any of this stuff, and I don't want to put in stuff that I haven't really explained in any of the workflows that I do, because the tutorials that I make that are on YouTube have a counterpart on the Patreon that has the workflow, and I don't want to just throw in a bunch of stuff like, wait, you didn't talk about this. Like, so I might start adding them in, I might not, because again, I don't know what people watch all the time, but I didn't want to just start throwing stuff in there that I didn't talk about, and then it becomes confusing, especially something like you don't see where the connection comes from, and I didn't talk about this anything everywhere, and maybe you didn't know about it. And if you did know about all these things, I'm sorry to have bored you with information you already did know, but maybe you didn't. So yeah, I just didn't like to put, especially something like this where it's like there's no connection towards it, and then you have no idea how it runs if it's not connected. There's even stuff like the set get node thing that, like, without explaining that, like, I don't think most people will understand that. I don't think there's a real use case for it in this situation, but there's a bunch of things that people use, and my channel is about explaining how things work, not just throwing stuff at you and then, here, I made it work. Who cares if you understand it? I want you to understand it. That's why it's called the alchemy, the arcane alchemy of how this AI stuff works. If I didn't bother explaining it, then I'm probably not doing my job or doing the job that I'm trying to do. So I hope this stuff was helpful. I'm probably going to try to do more of these tips and tricks videos. The real main one is that black screen thing, because as soon as that popped up, I was like, I know there's other people that deal with this. It's probably a headache for someone, so definitely had to talk about that. I'll probably be adding even more stuff on the Patreon where I get into more detail. Also, if you have like any like specific questions like that, just hop on the Patreon, go into the chat and just ask me about it. Like, I'm more than willing to like help people with like troubleshooting stuff, because the more I troubleshoot, the better I get too, and the more stuff I can explain how stuff works. So I know I have a Linux based computer and maybe not everyone has Linux, but there might be something else, some other way of solution that I can actually help solve the problem that you have, depending on what it is the problem is. So by all means, hop on Patreon, ask me some questions, especially if you have like a troubleshooting issue. Let me see if I can help you out. Hope you guys have a great day and have fun with this AI stuff.